Every journey is a series of choices. The first is to begin the journey. What pushes someone to do something? What pulls someone into a challenge? What traps a man in a loop of pain, failure, and agony? Think of challenges like art, sports, or software development. Is it the thrill of the endeavor in the moment? Or the feeling of success after a long fight is over? Maybe it's the fact that despite having everything else ready for your help wanted video, your quest won't let you transfer footage to your computer to the point where you completely stop meta support. But more likely than not, it's one of the first two. And if you're lucky, both. You may love drawing so much to the point where you don't care if you only have 20 followers on Tumblr. It's so much fun. Maybe you hate staring at pipes all day and trying to figure out what the heck is wrong, but that paycheck is worth it. Or maybe it's like a fun software game, which are fun enough to make you not mind failure, but hard enough to make you really appreciate how far you've come. So what does this have to do with Antichamber? Antichamber begins with one of the best tutorials I've ever seen in a video game. We begin looking at this big screen, one that seems pretty empty to start, but has a small doodle and philosophical candy for you. This big screen will fill up as we play, and we'll talk about it more once we get to it. But as for the rest of the Antichamber, with an E and not an I, get it? We see that we have a time limit, and the stress begins to settle. Doing anything within a time limit can be stressful, so we basically have an hour and a half to solve the world's most complicated bomb. But the game doesn't tell you what happens once time is up. Does all of our progress get reset like a roguelike? Or is it something good, like a new section of the chamber opening up for us to explore? Well, just like the game, I'm not going to tell you. And for the record, most of the footage of what you're seeing here was pulled from a playthrough that I completed within the time limit. Also in the chamber is a window that shows a big door that says exit. And just like that, our objective is made painfully clear. Exit. Lastly is this big map screen, one to be filled with rooms we can fast travel to, but for now, there's only one. Being our only option, we're sent to the first puzzle of the game. This one encourages you to jump. And you'd probably think this is a joke, you can't possibly make that jump. And you're right. We follow several stories to this lonely chamber with a dark hall and a sign. One with a little picture of a sheep jumping off a cliff, and the message, failing to proceed does not mean failure to progress. This is the first of many signs we see throughout our journey. These signs are not only fun little quotes to put on your Instagram, but also the design philosophy for many of the puzzles Antichamber presents us. In this instance, yeah, we didn't make the jump across this huge chasm, but we found another hall that leads us somewhere. And in such, we are met with the red stair, blue stair puzzle. This isn't anything revolutionary, save for the fact that neither staircase is correct. And the game downright tells you this. Retrace your steps though, and you'll discover one of the core gameplay elements of Antichamber: perspective. The entire chamber is made up of weeping angels. If you look away, there is no guarantee that things will be the same when you look back. The game flexes this in your face. Physically impossible corridors, big rooms and little spaces, and objects that change your environment when you look at them. After this puzzle, we head into this laser that opens the door and this sign. Turn around, and you realize you're trapped. This is not only flexes the perspective muscle once more, but also shows that failure is an option. There is no shame in pressing escape to return to the Antichamber. Upon returning, we see this ominous black tesseract floating through the doors on the other side of the glass. This thing is called the Black Ghost, and it's the closest thing we have to a main antagonist of the game. We also get the message, if you don't like where you've ended up, try doing something else. The map in the Antichamber shows you what rooms have other entrances or exits, which rooms you've taken and which ones you've yet to find. Some may only be accessible from one side or with a certain item. Others may stretch your brain to use your solving skills. That's when you hearken back to this message. If you do something else, the outcome will be different. To put it in action, we go back to the room we started in with the big gap, this time telling us to walk across it. And an invisible bridge forms beneath our feet. These blocks are only solid if you don't fall onto them, so jumping will make them fall below you. Antichamber has a science to it. None of the mechanisms screw with you just for the sake of screwing with you. Lasers will always trigger something, the corridor you walk down won't change to another the next time you go around just for fun, and these cubes won't just fade below you for the thrill of it. The game has mechanics that are made very clear, and it's up to you to master said mechanics. And once you've crossed the bridge, you have a split path. And this is where I'd argue the quote-unquote tutorial ends, because now we have freedom with what the game has taught us thus far. Listen to the signs, perspective is everything, don't fear failure, nothing is inconsistent, and find the exit. So, the title and thumbnail are probably on your mind right now. I claim that this game broke me. How? What does it mean for a game to break you? Typically, when a game breaks you, it usually means a game, which is supposed to be a fun time waster, begins to hurt your mental health. This usually happens when you try to play a game that is needlessly hard and overall painful for no reward, or seeing a game through to completion when it clearly wasn't designed for such. Or maybe you just get a little bit too into a game to the point where you have trouble living without it. But when I say break here, I mean break as in left a crack on my psyche. With the exception of the obvious change of perspective, Antichamber is a Metroidvania in its simplest form. Roaming around this corridor of optical illusions, you'll find doors you can't open, puzzles you can't solve, not for the lack of brain power, but for the lack of power. Figuring out which puzzles you aren't prepared to solve and which ones you're just too good for your goldfish brain is one of the more annoying aspects of the game, but progressing through the chamber, becoming more familiar with the chamber's nature, and gaining upgrades to progress through what seem like impossible puzzles is uber satisfying. But that's Metroidvania 101. So what makes Antichamber different? Your main method of progress is the matter gun. It starts out simple enough, you can place and remove colored blocks. It's simple, but it has so many uses, most of which are progressively taught to you through this array of puzzles. This brings up a very interesting aspect of some Metroidvanias that I love. That's not the player growing, but the player growing. And by that I mean you, sitting at your keyboard with a million things to do, but instead you're playing Antichamber. You get better when you play Antichamber because the environment becomes more clear to you, and your skills become more clear to you. This may just sound like Dark Souls, where the only reason you die over and over is your lack of integrity and skill, but I find it much deeper than that. For example, the green gun upgrade. On the surface it just seems like a rapid-fire version of the blue gun, allowing for more intricate puzzles to be solved, but upon further inspection, without the game actually telling you, you realize that there's more power than you realize. If you arrange any amount of cubes in an enclosed polygon, the middle fills itself in. This opens so many doors of opportunity. You can fill in spaces where lasers are, or you can just replicate more matter for more than you'll ever need. The remaining two upgrades for the gun have similar features. Every ability added has a simple upgrade and several sub-skills for you to master. Thinking about this, you realize how little other Metroidvanias use this tactic. It's normally just, got a grappling hook, now you can grapple. It's so much more satisfying when you gain an upgrade, but it's still up to you to upgrade yourself in order to progress. There's a discussion here about whether or not a game where the only thing that really gets better is yourself and your new skills can be considered a Metroidvania, but that's sadly a topic for another video. Anais laid against a pillow of the hospital bed with her eyes closed. She tried to get her mind off the shooting pain in her abdomen, the growing hunger in her stomach, the splitting migraine in her head, and even the annoying itch from her IV tube. They weren't easy to ignore. Anne! Anais turned to see Debbie in the room's doorway. She had her brown curly hair that matched her complexion up in sort of a small afro, along with a green sweater covered in reindeer, just what she needed. Hey, Dee. Debbie walked in. Are you alright? How do you feel? Like somebody drilled a hole straight through my stomach, and that's after they pumped me full of morphine. Geez, the doctor said you had appendicitis. Yep. When is it coming out? In about 2 hours. Speaking of which, can you pick me up around 7? Of course. Actually, are you going to be able to eat afterward? Yeah, they want me to, actually. What do you want from Kohl's? Anais thought for a second. A club. A big one. Pickles, onions, bacon, the whole shebang. Got it. Thanks. It's the least I could do. So what does recovery look like? Just a week or two of drowsiness and pain. Jeez. I'm sorry you have to spend Christmas like that. Yeah, I called Daniel. We both agreed it'd be better if he came down for New Year's instead of Christmas. That makes sense. Do you think he'll be well enough to come to my party? Oh, yeah, I wouldn't miss that for the world. Whoa, don't kill yourself to come to a party. You know I'm joking. I totally use this as an excuse to get out of a party. Yeah, that sounds about right. And, are you gonna be okay? Like, financially? Oh, yeah, my insurance covers most of this. I'll probably take a bit out of my savings, and I'll hold off on upgrading my PC, but that's really it. Good, good, that's really good. Yeah. Hey, can you do me a favor? Yeah. Can you let Ozzy out for a bit? Feed him a little? Of course, I'll have Taylor go there. She loves that bunny. And Ice let out a chuckle, which resulted in a sharp pain and a grunt. She launched her hand into her stomach and out of reflex, trying to calm down, breathing hard. Geez, I thought laughter was the best medicine, Debbie commented. Apparently not. Debbie looked over at the side table by Anaice's bed and saw a TV remote. She had somewhat of a sinister idea. Well, I don't really have anywhere to be. You mind if I stay a while? No, not at all. Debbie sat down on the bedside chair and grabbed the remote. Any requests? She said, wiggling it in front of Anaice's view. Nah, just something to make time go by faster. Suit yourself, Debbie said, grinning. She turned on the TV on the wall and flipped to the guide screen. She scrolled through the channels and found the Comedy Network. Wait. Anais could sense the mischief in the air. Debbie selected the channel, and the TV showed a video of a stand-up comedian. No, no! Anais tossed herself to her side and put her hands over her ears. She knew exactly what Debbie was trying to do. 1 second, let me turn it up, the volume. I can't hear all too well, Debbie said, laughing. No, stop, you're the worst. The man on the TV spoke. I'm a good Samaritan. The other day I was walking down the street in a rougher part of town. I saw this really nice bike just in one of those bike stops. So I left a note. I wrote, Hi, you forgot to put your bike in a bike lock. So I did it for you. You're welcome. The audience roared in laughter. Debbie was laughing, and Anais couldn't help herself. She was laughing at both the comedian and the form of torture Debbie was giving her. It was nothing new between the two. Anais was honestly surprised she didn't see it coming. The pain was still there, but it was much more tolerable in this situation. Having had her fun, Debbie muted the TV. Anais turned back over to look at her, smirking. Unmute it. There comes a point in Antichamber where you start to realize something about the nature of the chamber. And that's the fact that the game doesn't really want you to win. Again, not like Dark Souls where the game puts the bed of chaos between you and the end, but more like the game is trying to stop you from making a terrible mistake. Something like Link's Awakening almost. One way the game does this is by making distractions for you. For example, there's this puzzle. The game puts the green gun behind a gate which you need to have a certain amount of cubes to gain. You can't get enough cubes from the puzzle before it. So I spent an unhealthy amount of time trying to get matter from this puzzle room to this room. And after a while, I gave up. I went back to the Metroidvania, look where you haven't been, and went to another puzzle. This kind of led to a wander where I was following a completely different path of puzzles until on my first playthrough, I just blindly walked into the upgrade I had been tirelessly working towards. This happens a lot. The game puts something in your view, throws you off the beaten path, and says, oh yeah, here you go. Another and arguably bigger the way the game stops you from winning is the fact that the game doesn't tell you which puzzles you need to complete to beat the game. Each puzzle beckons to be solved, but on a blind playthrough, you have no idea what might be on the other side. But on a second or third playthrough, what puzzles you need to solve become fewer and fewer. You don't need to jump on the first puzzle. You can actually just walk across it and essentially skip the tutorial. Heck, you can beat this game in 10 minutes if you know what you're doing. So, if the majority of puzzles are irrelevant, what's the point then? Well, remember what I said about how the player gets better in this game? A good amount of these puzzles do help you get better at the game. They teach you about the environment and the abilities your gun has. So, while they aren't necessary to progress, they're necessary to grow. Another incentive is the amount of developer rooms, small rooms that show you parts of the development after beating some tough puzzles. As a fellow game developer and someone who thinks the only play to play Portal 2 is with developer commentary, I love these. But I realize not everybody will. And there are a handful of puzzles that don't even have these. They just plop you back into some part of the Antichamber you've already been in, so what's the point of these ones? There isn't any. Not everything needs a reason. Not everything has a deeper meaning. Antichamber plays around with this concept, constantly teasing the player to decipher the hidden meaning of its environment, find answers for why the world is this way. But this isn't FNAF lore. The real meaning is actually on the surface, all around the player really. It's the serene sounds that fill the different parts of the chamber. The signs that tell us to seek our out opportunity, how to solve problems, or that it's time for your journey to end. The puzzles, the dev rooms, it all becomes clear. Antichamber is a game about life. Why are so many puzzles completely unnecessary? Because the finer parts of life are completely unnecessary. You don't need to go to medical school, start a family, take a vacation to Athens, live abroad, either learn to make games or win a Pulitzer Prize to beat life, but you can beat this game in 43 seconds. And that's impressive. You can also beat life in 43 seconds. Is that impressive? I wasn't lying when I said this game broke me. In the most basic and comfortably open way, I'll explain that like this. I don't binge games. I don't stay up late saying, oh, one more match, one more boss, one more level. Looking at my hours of gameplay per week, it's kind of hard to call myself a true gamer. I usually sink in maybe 1 hour a day if I'm lucky. What can I say? I'm a busy guy. I love video games, but my time constraints just make them difficult to play. But I appreciate them so much more because of it. In the 2 days between me buying Antichamber and beating it for the first time, I ended up racking in 6 hours across 2 sessions, both of which went way into the late hours of the night. After getting footage, I ended up racking 9 hours across 5 days. That's probably not new for you GigaChad gamers, but that's not remotely normal for me. I'm the guy who looks at games like Elden Ring and Tears of the Kingdom, plays them for 6 hours, declares them masterpieces, and never ends up beating them. Antichamber is different. It's hard to not think about it. It's hard to turn away. There was always one more puzzle, one more try, one more... I just feel broken because of this game. Was this a disappointing answer? Good.